a Sapphire Running Zone podcast.
Hi everyone, this is Tim from the Sapphire Running Zone. Welcome to another of our training and fundraising support podcast series. So this one is part of the training program and it's all about hill training. Now, hill training is something obviously that isn't necessarily most people's favorite part of their running training. And for a lot of us, we don't even need to worry about it. It really is for people who want to go that little bit quicker or are training specifically for an event that is very hilly. And it really is important to just push on and do some slightly different training than you would normally do. So why do we do it? Well, there's a number of different physical and performance technical benefits of hill training. And a little bit later in this podcast, we're going to talk to Jacob Cohn, who is training for the New York City Marathon, and that is quite a hilly one. Aside from the bridges, there's still quite a few hills in that race, along with the likes of Boston, which is obviously quite hilly, and events like the Big Sur International Marathon out in California. It's another of the big races, not big in terms of volume of people, but big in terms of profile, and that's extremely hilly. So you really do need to be doing some quality hill training if we're going to be taking on races like that, if you want to get a decent time. Like, you can run New York and Boston with no hill training if you just want to get round. But if you want to go a little bit better and put a decent time on the board, then you really do need to do hill training. So we're going to talk to Jacob a little bit later about what he does in his hill training program, how he goes about it, how often, etc. Hill training is one of a number of different approaches to training if you want to improve your times a little bit. And there are others like interval training, and we'll look at that in another podcast. And track running, a lot of that is interval work. A lot of people do their interval work on the track. Others do their interval training just out and about as normal, using landmarks, lampposts, etc. as their sort of targets. But interval training is quite a common way of improving your speed, as is hill training. So we will look at intervals, track stuff a little bit later on. So what are the physical reasons for doing hill training? Well, one of them is to develop your muscle fibers, and hill workouts can make a big difference to your muscle power and your ability to handle certain situations. It does change the way your muscles develop. This is across both, all three, slow, medium, and fast twitch fibers. So overall, by improving the quality of those fibers, it improves your muscles' power, which is really important. You also do see an improvement in your endurance, and this is why a lot of runners who are looking to try and improve their times will do hill training, even if they're training for a flat race like London or Great North Run, for example. If you train hard on hills, your body becomes more resilient and efficient, and it does make you run quicker because you have that better endurance on your normal runs. It also boosts your cardiovascular fitness quite significantly. It's a lot harder, obviously, doing hill running, and it pushes your heart and lungs. So your whole cardiovascular system improves significantly when you are doing hill training. You don't want to overdo it, obviously, but there is no doubt that there can be a very significant improvement in your cardiovascular fitness, as opposed to just running on the flat all the time. So this is, a lot of us can't avoid doing hills when we're out on a normal run, but hill training generally is going back and doing those hills again and again and again. And you'll hear from Jacob as to how he goes about doing that very shortly. It builds strength and power, basically. So the muscles, your glutes, your hamstrings, calves, quads, they all are strengthened as a result of hill work, and you get more power. than you would do from just consistently running on the flat. So you add all those four physical benefits together, and you can understand why a lot of runners actually, if they want to go from, say, a 5 hour down to a 4 hour, or 4 to a 3:30 marathon, or they want to go from a 2 hour to a 1:30 half marathon over a period of time, then putting hill training in there, mixing it up with intervals and track work, this is how generally you go about doing that. So I caught up with Jacob recently. Jacob's based in New York. He's on the World Marathon Majors trek at the moment, wanting to do all the races, but wanting to do them quickly. And he is trying to qualify for all of the majors, which is a major achievement, excuse the pun. We're talking about 250, 255 for a marathon. And there's no guarantee then that you'll actually get the spot. That's the minimum qualifying time, but it just depends on how many others are also in it. So for Jacob, pushing hard to get that kind of time means using all the varying training methods that are possible, and that includes hill running. Now, his first event this year that he's got to do is, as I said, the New York City Marathon, and that is hilly in places, very hilly. So let's catch up with Jacob and explore how he goes about his hill training.
Do a lot of hill work, and that varies as well in itself. New York is hilly, definitely. I think Boston's just a little bit more. You start on a bridge. I think you climb 120 to 140 feet. So take that steady. Importantly, taking down the hills is maybe even more important, not to kill your quads. Naturally in New York, there is quite a lot of undulating hills, which people probably aren't aware of. I'll do Central Park. I'll go and do Queensboro Bridge, which is the same route, 16 mile, of the New York Marathon route. So I will go and do hills just naturally, but then also sort of, again, like a tempo session or an interval session, I will go and do some of the bridges, which I don't really like doing, but it's important. And that helps with form, helps with your spring, helps with sort of your VO2, cardiovascular conditioning as well, obviously. So there's a bit of two benefits, really. One, naturally going to do the hills to get used to the track of New York, which you will go and have to battle, but also getting yourself faster as well. Doing those hill sessions, you do get so much quicker on. You hopefully will start to feel the spring back from those painful interval hill sessions that you have to do.
Is that once a week, the hill session?
No, not once a week for me personally. I wouldn't recommend doing an interval hill session once a week, really. I think it's a lot on the body. You are overextending everything from your groin, your front of your quad, your Achilles, your hamstrings. It's 60 seconds up the hill. That's the session for me, really. And I jog back down. I don't think anything more than that, unless you're doing undulating long hills. But the interval session, 60 seconds up the hill, nothing really more than that, I don't think.
How many times?
Okay. How many times? 10? 10 times? A bit, but also build into it as well. Like, if you're new into hill sessions as an interval, just start off, just do one, see how you feel, and build into it. And for me, it would be once every 2 or 3 weeks. Not once a week. I think your body has to allow for the time to recover. Your ligaments, joints, they have to adapt. But don't just go off and try and do 10 reps if you've never done it before. And then again, for me, I've got an ongoing groin niggle, and obviously that overextension kind of makes it a little bit more inflamed. So I've got to be a bit careful with that.
So just with the same principle really then with the long run, which is that you just gradually put on a bit more time every week, the same principle applies then to your intervals and your hill work. You don't just suddenly go in with the equivalent of a 18-mile run. You just go in and you gradually build that up over time.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, absolutely.
That's great. Thanks, Jacob. We appreciate your input. So let's talk a little bit more about the sort of performance and technical benefits of hill training. It does build mental strength. Getting up and over a hill can be very, very challenging for all of us, irrespective of the height of that hill. And clearly, the more hill training that you do, the more you will get used to that positive feeling of taking on a hill and beating it. There's nothing worse being in a race, coming around the corner and seeing a massive hill in front of you. Now, what we should obviously all do prior to an event is check out the gradient profile, which most of the races have on their website. And you should roughly know where the hills are and know what's coming, basically, what kind of height's coming. And not many of us end up doing that. So for the majority of us, going around the corner and seeing a hill is an almighty shock. Now, if you've done a whole heap of hill training, actually that stops being a shock, or it stops being a negative. And actually it becomes a positive because you've done that much hill training that actually, bring it on. You see a hill, you want to go over it. And that's the key. So I think the mental strength that you get from hill training can be really significant. If you've done, flip that on its head, if you've done none and suddenly you go into a race and there's some hills, even 2 or 3 big ones, then it can be a real negative and it can drain you physically and mentally. And that is really important because what you don't want in any race is to be drained mentally. You need positive vibes from start to finish. It also can enhance your speed quite significantly. So there's been a whole heap of studies that show that your overall speed, race times can be very significantly improved by hill training. And why is that? Well, it just goes back to those points we talked about before. You've got better muscle fibers, you've got increased endurance, you've got better cardiovascular fitness, and you've got strength and power in your glutes, your hammies, your quads, and your calves. So clearly, you're going to get performance benefits off the back of that. And that's the reason the likes of Jacob are pushing hard with their hill training to make sure they get those performance benefits. It gives you a slightly different running style as well, because when you run up a hill, ideally, you want to be going with higher knees and really pushing and driving with your arms. So you tend to get a better running style when you consistently do hill training. You shouldn't just drift up a hill. You should attack a hill. And what you tend to find is that attack format of the high knees, greater hip extensions, etc., you will then take that style throughout a lot of your running, and you'll even, you will run differently, but always go hard on those hills and make sure you attack them. Believe it or not, it can also reduce your injuries. I know that might sound a bit weird when you think that you're going to be pushing hard up hills, but actually because you're strengthening your muscles, and also your tendons and your ligaments, your body will become more resilient. And that's really important. And it's also good for your joints as well, because you're pushing off the ground on an incline. You, generally speaking, will reduce the stress on the joints compared to running on a flat surface. So, you add all that lot together and you can understand why hill training is so, I would say, loved by quicker runners, but utilized significantly. Now, they don't necessarily, as Jacob touched on, they don't necessarily love doing it, but they know the value of it. And that's what I would stress for anyone who's taking on a training for a distance event, particularly, when you're talking half marathon, you need to worry about it so much on a 5K or a 10K. But when you're doing a longer distance race, bring it in to play. And as you heard Jacob saying, he only does it every couple of weeks. You don't need to go mad. But hill training isn't just running up hills. It's using hills to train and to strengthen your muscles, tendons, ligaments, build up a slightly different body, if you like, than you would if you were just running on the flat all the time. It's not something that we're all going to love. I'm very clear about that. I don't particularly love hill training, but I do absolutely understand its benefits. And when we talk about injury prevention, how do we stop getting injured? I think a lot of people don't necessarily think of hill training as a way of getting less injuries. But what it does is it just builds that resilience, and it builds that physical resilience because you are strengthening your body. You're changing your running style slightly because you're driving up the hill. But it's also that importance of that mental strength that you're building. You do not want to be in a position in any race where you are beaten by hills. Now, that's easier said than done. Some races, I touched on the Big Sur marathon, which I did last year, and I was beaten by that. There was no amount of hill training that was going to prevent me from being beaten by that. But there's plenty of other races where there will be the odd couple of hills, and they will beat a lot of people because they've done no training on those hills. So mental benefit of hill training can be really significant because you can see a hill, you can attack it because you're physically strong enough, but also mentally you're strong enough that you know that you're going to go up that hill comfortably, you're going to beat it, you're going to come down the other side feeling great, and you're going to feel really positive. You're going to overtake loads of people going up it, and you're going to feel the mental benefits of that very significantly. So there's a whole heap of reasons for doing hill training. The most important thing, as we touched on in that clip with Jacob, is not to overdo it. So you take the same approach that you do with your long run. You very gradually increase the amount of hill training you do. And your hill training might simply be one hill that's close to you that you run up and down consistently. But what you don't do is you don't do your first session of, 10 runs to the top and back down again. You don't do that. You might do 1 or 2 or 3, and you gradually increase the amount of times you run up that hill and the speed that you run up that hill. The first time you do it, ever so gently, see how you feel. You might even walk a bit of it depending on its gradient, and then slowly back down. You might change the amount of time you rest in between. So we don't always have to go up the hill, run back down quickly, straight back up the hill again. You develop a routine, a schedule that suits you and where you are in your training, and that is so important. Do not overdo it. Just like you wouldn't do your first long run of 10, 12 miles, you will do it sensibly based on where you are in your training, and you will ever so gradually increase it, probably a mile every weekend. Same applies with the hill training. Gradually change what you're doing based on your starting point and the amount of time that you've got to train. So you're just adding a little bit every time. And that applies to all the training that we do. It's this training principle of progression, gradual progression. Because if you don't do that, you will get injured. So the injury benefits of hill training, i.e. that it gradually builds up your muscles, your tendons, your ligaments, that will be ruined if you do too much too soon. So take it easy. Enjoy the hill training as much as you can. Integrate it into your training program along with intervals, track sessions, etc. And then over time, you'll see huge benefits, particularly if you're going to take on hilly marathon at some point, or a hilly half marathon. And just think of the mental benefits when you're flying up that hill in your race and others are just ambling around you and puffing and panting. So enjoy it, and I look forward to welcoming you to another podcast soon.
Thanks for listening to this Sapphire Running Zone podcast. Keep checking back as we have lots more podcasts coming soon.